It's really fascinating how we treat our own minds almost exactly like consumer electronics.
Oh, completely. Like we're just gadgets.
Right. When you realize you need to make a major life change, say, I don't know, you want to stop snapping at your kids or you want to finally write that novel, you tend to treat yourself like a smartphone. You acknowledge a glitch, you see that a software update is available, you mentally tap install, and you just like assume you're going to wake up the next morning as this shiny, bug-free, optimized version of yourself.
Yeah, it is a very pervasive, almost clinical way we view personal development today. The assumption is that intention alone is just, a binary switch. You download the new habit, delete the old file, reboot, and the transformation is complete.
But then you actually try to execute the change. And suddenly, your internal operating system starts throwing these massive error codes.
Oh, the system crashes.
Totally. You find yourself yelling at traffic the very next morning, or you sit down to write and end up scrolling on your phone for 2 hours. Your own hardware actively resists the update. It feels less like a clean installation and more like you're in a street fight with your own nervous system.
Which is really the ultimate human paradox. We consciously, intellectually decide we want to change our behavior, yet our biology, our cellular neurochemistry, physically mounts a defense to keep us exactly the same.
It's wild.
We are dealing with a literal chemical addiction to our past selves.
Well, welcome to the Book Nook, fellow learners. We are so glad you are here with us in the community today. In this deep dive, we are completely dismantling that paradox. We are tackling a book that honestly rewrites the manual on how human beings fundamentally change.
Yeah.
We're exploring Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
And for some context on the author before we get into it, Dispenza has a background as a chiropractor, but he has spent the last couple of decades really as a neuroscience educator and researcher. His primary focus has been investigating spontaneous remissions, those cases where people cured themselves of chronic or terminal conditions without traditional medical intervention, and mapping the actual measurable biology behind that kind of profound change.
Yeah, and the mission for this deep dive is to explore the intersection of three fields that rarely sit at the same dinner table, right? Quantum physics, neurobiology, and meditation.
A strange combo, but it works.
It really does. We want to understand exactly how you can rewire your brain and literally reinvent your personal reality. And I'm genuinely fascinated by this because the promise of the book is undeniably bold. The core thesis here is that our thoughts literally shape our physical reality.
Right. And I should establish right away that we're going to frame this entirely through the lens of measurable science. Because when we talk about thoughts shaping reality, it is so easy to veer into magical thinking or, that kind of toxic positivity that suggests you can just wish $1 million into your bank account.
Oh, for sure. Just like manifest a Ferrari while sitting on the couch.
Exactly. Dispenza's work is an attempt to ground these concepts in actual mechanics. We're looking at the how and the why of transformation.
So let's start with the foundational premise, because before we can build a new reality, the book insists we have to basically demolish our current understanding of what reality even is. And to do that, we have to go back to like 17th century science class. We have to talk about René Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton.
Yeah, our entire modern worldview, how we view medicine, physics, and even psychology is still heavily, heavily influenced by the Cartesian and Newtonian models.
Oh, stuff of the past.
Very much so. Descartes essentially drew a line down the middle of the universe. He posited that the mind, consciousness, and thought belonged to the realm of the divine or the spiritual. Matter, the physical world, was the realm of science. Descartes argued that the mind had absolutely no measurable effect on the physical world. They were completely separate domains.
The ultimate dualism. Always matter. Never mind.
And Newton codified that dualism into mathematics. In the Newtonian universe, reality is a giant, predictable machine. If an apple falls from a tree, it hits the ground with a calculable force. It is all just cause and effect. Everything is made of solid, predictable matter interacting in absolute time and space.
And I understand why that was a comforting model for a few centuries. It makes the world seem manageable, like a big clock.
It's reliable.
Right. But there is a massive psychological side effect to that worldview.
Yeah.
If the universe is just a predetermined machine ticking away like a giant clock, then you and I are just tiny little cogs inside it. It inherently makes us victims of our circumstances.
Yes, exactly.
When my physical environment dictates my reality and my mind has no power over matter, I am trapped. But then we hit the 20th century. Albert Einstein enters the chat, the field of quantum mechanics is born, and that neat little mechanical clock just shatters into a million pieces.
It really does. The shift from Newtonian physics to quantum physics is arguably the most profound intellectual leap in human history. When scientists finally developed the technology to observe the subatomic realm, the electrons and photons that make up the atoms of our physical world, they discovered that these particles did not obey Newton's laws at all.
They were just doing their own thing.
Completely. They behaved in ways that totally defied mechanical logic.
I remember the old toothpick and styrofoam ball models of atoms from middle school. You know the
Well,
ones?
yeah, we all made those.
We're taught that an atom is a solid little solar system. You have a dense nucleus in the middle, and these solid little electron planets orbiting around it.
Right, but that model is entirely obsolete. In reality, the atom is mostly empty space. To give you the specific numbers, Dispenza cites, an atom is 99.9999999% energy and only 0.000001% physical matter.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
That means there's almost nothing there.
Practically nothing physical. To put that in perspective, if the nucleus of an atom were the size of a marble sitting on the 50-yard line of a football stadium, the nearest electron would be a tiny gnat buzzing around in the highest bleachers. Everything in between is empty space.
Which is deeply unsettling to think about. Like the chair you are sitting on right now, the device playing this audio, the very bones in your body. You are mathematically more no thing than something.
It's wild to conceptualize.
We perceive solidity, but fundamentally everything is just vibrating fields of energy and information.
It requires a complete suspension of our sensory input to really grasp it. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. It isn't just that matter is mostly empty space. It is how the tiny fraction of actual matter behaves.
Okay, lay it on me.
In the quantum field, an electron doesn't exist as a solid point moving through space like a tiny billiard ball. When it is not being observed, an electron exists as a wave of infinite probability. It exists in a state of superposition, meaning it has the potential to be anywhere and everywhere simultaneously within that field.
Okay, wait, I need to pause here because this is where my brain starts to rebel against the science. Are you saying the building blocks of my body don't actually exist as solid things until something interacts with them?
That is the cornerstone of quantum mechanics, demonstrated famously by the double-slit experiment. It is known as the observer effect. Subatomic particles remain as infinite waves of probability until a conscious observer focuses attention on them.
The attention changes it.
Exactly. The moment a measurement is made, or observation occurs, that wave of infinite possibilities collapses into a single physical event in time and space. The observer's attention literally forces the energy to manifest as a particle.
The implications of that are staggering. I mean, if human observation, our mindful attention, can literally force a wave of invisible energy to coalesce into a particle of solid matter at the subatomic level, then that Cartesian separation of mind and matter is completely false.
It's completely dead.
The mind is directly influencing matter.
And Dispenza takes that verifiable physics concept and extrapolates it into a practical question. If we are already doing this passively at a micro level every single day, what happens if we learn to direct this observer effect intentionally? Can we collapse the specific waves of probability that contain the life we actually want to experience?
Okay, let's unpack this, because to do that, we have to understand the mechanism of communication. How does a human being actually talk to a quantum field? I can't just, yell at an atom.
No, shouting doesn't work.
Dispenza provides a model for this that I found incredibly helpful. He categorizes our thoughts as the electrical charge in the quantum field and our feelings as the magnetic charge.
It is a really brilliant functional metaphor, and it's rooted in our physiology. When you generate a thought, the neurons in your brain fire, creating a measurable electrical impulse. We see this constantly on EEG scans. Your brain is essentially an electrical generator. However, an electrical signal alone is linear. It doesn't have the attractive force to pull an experience towards you.
It needs a magnet.
Precisely. And the magnetic charge is generated by your emotions. Your heart actually produces a magnetic field that is significantly stronger than the brain's.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes. When you combine a specific thought, the electrical charge, with a specific emotion, the magnetic charge, you create a comprehensive state of being. That state of being emits a unique electromagnetic signature out into the quantum field.
Let me introduce an analogy from the text to make this concrete, because it perfectly illustrates why most of our attempts to change fail so miserably. Think about the difference between a standard incandescent light bulb and a laser,
Good analogy.
A regular light bulb emits light waves that are incoherent. They scatter in every direction, completely out of phase with each other. It illuminates a room, sure, but it lacks focused power. Laser light, however, is coherent. The waves of light are perfectly aligned, moving together in phase. Because they are coherent, they are incredibly powerful. They can literally cut through steel.
And that coherence is the exact missing ingredient in human intention.
Exactly. Dispenza argues that to change reality, we need that same laser-like coherence between our thoughts and our feelings. Say you decide you want a new, high-paying job. You sit down, close your eyes, and think, I am a successful executive. That is your electrical signal. But physically, in your body, you feel anxious, unworthy, and terrified of failure. That fear is your magnetic signal.
So the thought and the feeling are completely out of phase.
Right. The signal you are broadcasting into the quantum field is completely incoherent. It's scattered light. The universe, or the quantum field, whatever you want to call it, doesn't respond to mixed signals. You are thinking one thing but being another, and the field only responds to who you are being.
To validate this requirement for coherence, Dispenza points to some really compelling research. Most notably, the HeartMath DNA experiment conducted by Dr. Glenn Rain in the early 1990s. Rain wanted to test if human intention could physically alter the structure of DNA, but he specifically tested for the variable of coherence.
This study is the linchpin for this whole theory. Walk us through how they set it up, because it's kind of mind-blowing.
So, Rain took vials of human DNA suspended in water and divided the participants into 3 groups. Group 1 was instructed to hold the vial and simply generate a highly elevated positive emotion, love, gratitude, appreciation. But they were told not to hold any specific intention or thought about the DNA itself. They just had to feel the emotion.
So pure magnetic charge, no electrical direction.
Exactly. And the result was 0 statistically significant change in the DNA structure.
Okay.
Then group 2 was brought in. They were given the exact opposite instructions. They were told to hold a very clear, focused thought, a specific intention to either win or unwind the DNA strands in the vial. But they were instructed to remain emotionally neutral. No elevated feelings whatsoever.
Pure electrical charge. No magnetic pull.
Again, 0 measurable change to the DNA. Thought alone did nothing. Emotion alone did nothing. Finally, Group 3 was instructed to combine both. They held the clear thought, the intention to change the shape of the DNA, while simultaneously generating an elevated emotion of love or appreciation. They achieved the coherent state.
And the DNA physically responded.
It did. In the presence of that coherent electromagnetic signature, the DNA strands wound or unwound by up to 25% within a matter of minutes.
25%.
Yeah. The physical matter of the DNA was altered by the coherent state of the observer.
If that doesn't make you pause, I don't know what will. It moves the concept of intention from this, fluffy self-help platitude into a biological and physical reality.
Huh?
But there is another layer to this quantum model that completely breaks my brain.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
It is the concept of quantum entanglement, the idea that once particles have interacted, they remain connected across space and time. Dispenza uses a study to show that our coherent intentions don't just affect the DNA in our immediate physical grasp, but can affect reality across vast distances and even backwards in time.
Yes, you are referring to the retro prayer experiment. It is a study that profoundly challenges our linear perception of time. In the year 2000, a physician named Dr. Leonard Leibovici conducted a double-blind, randomized study on the effects of prayer on hospital patients suffering from severe sepsis.
Okay, stop right there. I have to play the skeptic for a moment, because prayer studies are notoriously difficult to control. How did they ensure this wasn't just, the placebo effect, or maybe just better medical care on that specific floor?
That is the brilliant part of the design. Leibovici divided over 3,000 patient records into a control group and an intervention group. He gave a list of the intervention group's names to individuals and asked them to pray for their full and quick recovery. The results showed that the prayed-for group had significantly shorter durations of fever and shorter overall hospital stays compared to the control group.
Wow.
The statistical variance was significant enough to completely rule out coincidence.
Which is fascinating on its own. But the detail that makes this a quantum physics discussion rather than a theology discussion is when these patients were actually in the hospital.
Right. The people praying were doing so in the year 2000, but the patients they were praying for were not currently in the hospital. Leibovici had randomly selected the names from a hospital database of patients who had been treated for sepsis between 1990 and 1996. 4 to 10 years prior to the study.
I really need to slow down here to make sure I'm grasping this. You were telling me that people generating a coherent intention in the year 2000 cured the fevers of people who are lying in a hospital bed in 1993. How is that logically possible without tearing a hole in the space-time continuum?
It requires us to abandon the Newtonian clock. In the quantum field, time is not a linear arrow pointing from past to future. All potentials, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously in the field as waves of probability. The study suggests that the coherent intention generated in 2000 collapsed a probability wave that altered the physical reality of a patient in the 1990s. The intention literally reached across time.
That is incredible. So, okay, if our thoughts and feelings are this unbelievably powerful, if we can restructure DNA and alter the past, we had to confront a very painful question here. Why am I still struggling with the exact same bad habits I had 5 years ago?
Right.
I mean, if I am a quantum creator, why do I keep manifesting the exact same frustrating Tuesday over and over again? Why is it so excruciatingly difficult to change my diet or stop feeling anxious or quit a toxic job?
That is the crucial pivot of the book. To answer why change is so difficult, we have to leave the abstract realm of quantum physics and look closely at the wetware inside our skulls. We have to examine our own neurobiology, specifically the biology of habit.
Because the universe might be quantum, but my brain feels very, very Newtonian. It feels very stuck in cause and effect.
It is entirely governed by cause and effect at a cellular level. The foundation of this neurobiological trap is a concept called Hebbian learning. In 1949, neuropsychologist Donald Hebb theorized that nerve cells that fire together wire together.
Okay, explain the mechanics of that. What does wiring together actually look like in the physical brain?
Well, your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. When you have a thought, experience an emotion, or perform an action, a specific sequence of those neurons fires an electrical impulse. They release chemicals across the microscopic gaps between them, which are called synapses.
Okay, so a spark jumps the gap.
Exactly. Now, if you only have that thought once, the connection is temporary. But if you repeat that thought or action, those specific neurons begin to form a physical, long-term relationship. They grow new dendritic branches and literally hardwire themselves together. The synaptic connection becomes thicker and much more efficient.
So the brain is quite literally reorganizing its physical structure to reflect my environment and my repeated experiences.
Down to the microscopic level.
If I wake up every single morning, immediately check my phone, read a stressful news article, feel a surge of anxiety, complain to my partner about the state of the world, and then sit in traffic gripping the steering wheel, I am firing a very specific sequence of neural circuits. And if I repeat that routine for 10 years, I am not just used to being stressed. I have built a biological superhighway for stress.
You have constructed a highly efficient neurological network designed to reproduce that exact state of being automatically. And this brings us to Dispenza's definition of a habit. He defines a habit as a state where your body remembers how to do something better than your conscious mind does.
I think about that every time I drive a car.
It's the perfect example.
When you first learn to drive, it is purely a frontal lobe activity. You have to consciously think about every single variable. You adjust the mirror, you think about the exact pressure on the brake, you look for the turn signal. It requires massive conscious energy.
That is the thinking phase of learning.
Right. Then you practice it for months. That is the doing phase. But flash forward 10 years. I can get in my car, drive 20 miles to work, navigate traffic, change lanes, and arrive at my office, all while my conscious mind is entirely consumed with rehearsing an argument I want to have with my boss. I don't remember the drive at all. I have moved into the being phase. My body drove the car. My body became the subconscious mind for that specific task.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, that is a brilliant conservation of energy. If we had to consciously process every single step of walking or driving or typing, our brains would exhaust their energy supply in an hour.
We'd be exhausted.
Completely. The problem arises when we apply this exact same mechanism to our emotional states.
This is where it gets terrifying.
Dispenza points out that by the time an average human is 35 years old, 95% of who they are is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, and beliefs that function like an involuntary computer program. Only 5% of your mind is actually conscious.
So when I say, I really want to be a more patient person, that is my 5% conscious mind talking. But I'm pitting that 5% against a 95% subconscious machine that has actively practiced being impatient, frustrated, and reactive for 3 decades. The body has become the master.
And the body will fight viciously to maintain that mastery because it isn't just a neurological wiring issue. It is a severe chemical addiction. This is where we have to discuss peptides.
Yes, please unpack this. Because when Dispenza talks about cellular addiction to emotions, he means it literally, not metaphorically, like an actual addiction.
Extremely literal. At the base of your brain is the hypothalamus. Think of it as a chemical manufacturing plant. When you experience an emotion, say a flash of deep anger, your hypothalamus instantly formulates a specific chain of amino acids called a neuropeptide that perfectly matches the chemical signature of anger. It dumps these peptides right into your bloodstream.
Like a bartender mixing a very specific cocktail?
Yeah, a perfect analogy. And those peptides travel through the blood and attach to the exterior receptors of the cells all throughout your body. When the anger peptide docks onto a cell, it acts like a key in a lock. It alters the cell's function, its state, and even its genetic expression.
Okay, so my cells are literally drinking the anger cocktail.
And just like a person drinking alcohol regularly, the cells build a tolerance. As cells divide and create new cells, the new cells are generated with more receptors for anger peptides and fewer receptors for, say, joy or contentment. Your body physically demands more anger just to feel normal.
Wow. So let's say I realize I am a chronically angry person and I decide to change. I wake up and declare, today I will not get angry, I choose peace. I am using my 5% conscious mind to cut off the supply of anger cocktails. What actually happens to the cells?
They go into chemical withdrawal.
Just like that.
Within hours, your cells realize the receptors are empty. They send urgent electrochemical signals up the spinal cord back to the brain, essentially demanding, "We're starving down here. Give us our chemical fix."
The overeager bartender analogy continues. The body is yelling at the brain to mix the old drink.
And your brain usually complies. The body forces the brain to start generating thoughts that will produce the desired emotion. You will suddenly remember something awful your mother-in-law said 3 years ago, or you will start obsessing over a minor financial issue. Your internal dialogue starts whispering, "You can't change. This is too hard. You have a right to be angry. Just start again tomorrow." The body is hijacking the mind to get its chemical fix.
It is a biological hostage situation.
Yeah.
The moment change gets uncomfortable, it is literally your cells crying out in withdrawal. Understanding this removes so much of the shame around failing to change,
Yeah.
We usually frame failure as a lack of willpower or some kind of moral failing, but in reality, you're fighting a physiological addiction to your own past.
Exactly. Which brings us to another massive excuse we use to avoid change: the genetic myth. We love to blame our DNA for our limitations.
Oh, totally. I can't help my temper. My dad was an angry guy. It's in my genes. Or my family has a history of depression, so I am genetically doomed to be miserable.
What's fascinating here is that deterministic view of genetics. The idea that your DNA is a set of rigid instructions that inevitably dictate your physical and mental health is fundamentally outdated. Dispenza spends a lot of time discussing the field of epigenetics, which literally translates to above the gene.
How does epigenetics change the narrative for us?
For a long time, the scientific dogma was that DNA controlled everything. Epigenetics proved that genes are just blueprints. A blueprint doesn't build a house on its own. A gene must be activated or expressed to produce a protein. And what activates the gene? Signals from the environment.
The environment outside the cell.
Exactly. And while that includes your physical environment like toxins, diet, sunlight, the most powerful environment for a human cell is the internal chemical environment, your emotions. The peptide cocktails we just discussed. If you are living in a chronic state of stress or fear, the chemistry of that emotion bathes your cells and signals specific genes to express in ways that break down the body, causing disease and aging.
But the reverse must also be true, right?
Right.
If I can change my internal environment, if I can achieve that quantum coherence and generate elevated emotions of gratitude or joy, I am creating a brand new chemical environment. I'm literally signaling new genes in new ways, down-regulating the disease genes and up-regulating the genes for health and repair. I am not my DNA's victim. I am its epigenome's architect.
That is the ultimate biological promise of Dispenza's work. You can rewrite your biological destiny. But to do so, you have to break the chemical addiction to your old self. You have to overcome what he categorizes as the big three.
The big three: environment, body, and time. These are the three pillars holding up our old identity. Let's break them down, starting with the environment.
Most people's internal state is completely dictated by their external environment. Your brain is a record of your past. Every person you know, every place you go, every object you own has a neurological network attached to it in your brain.
So when I wake up and see the exact same bedroom, sleep next to the same person, drive the same route to the same office, and look at the same computer screen, my environment is firing all those old hardwired networks. My external world is forcing my brain to remember exactly who I was yesterday.
You are reacting to your environment, not creating your reality. To change, your thoughts must become greater than your environment.
And the second of the big three is the body, which we just covered extensively with the peptide addiction. The body is screaming for its familiar chemistry. To overcome the body, your conscious mind must elevate above those cravings. You have to become the master of the servant again.
And the final, perhaps most difficult obstacle is time.
I struggle with this one immensely.
We all do. The human brain, specifically a region called the default mode network, spends the vast majority of its time either anticipating the future based on past anxieties or dwelling on memories of the past. We are essentially living out of time.
We rehearse the worst-case scenario for a meeting tomorrow, triggering the stress chemicals today. Or we replay a humiliating argument from a decade ago, triggering in the shame chemicals today. The body doesn't know the difference between the actual event and the thought creating the emotion.
It doesn't. Your body believes it is living in that past trauma or future disaster right now, in this exact moment. To overcome time, we must enter what is often called the precious present. The present moment is the only place where the door to the quantum field actually exists.
Dispenza says that to truly enter the quantum field, we must become no body, no thing, no time. We have to completely strip away our identity. We leave the ego, the social security number, the mortgage, the schedule, and the physical aches behind. We have to become pure consciousness. And the tool he advocates for achieving this and for rewriting the brain without relying on the physical environment is mental rehearsal.
Mental rehearsal is the practical application of bypassing the physical doing phase of learning and going straight from thinking to being. Because of neuroplasticity, when you mentally rehearse an action with complete, absolute, uninterrupted focus, the frontal lobe cannot distinguish between the internal thought and an external physical experience.
I want to highlight a specific study you have in the notes here because it proves this isn't just theory, the piano finger studies. This fundamentally changed how I view my own thoughts.
It is a seminal piece of research in neuroplasticity. Scientists took two groups of individuals who had no prior experience playing the piano. Group 1 was brought into a lab and instructed to physically practice playing specific piano scales and finger exercises for 2 hours a day for 5 days.
Which is a decent amount of practice.
Indeed. Before and after the 5 days, the researchers took fMRI scans of the participants' brains. As expected, the scans of Group 1 showed that they had developed new, dense neural circuits in the specific area of the brain's motor cortex that controls the fingers. They literally grew new hardware.
Cause and effect. The physical environment changed the brain.
Now, Group 2 was brought in. They were taught the scales, but they were never allowed to touch a physical piano.
Not even once.
Not once. Their instructions were to sit quietly for 2 hours a day for 5 days and only mentally rehearse playing those exact same scales. They were told to imagine the movement of their fingers and the sound of the notes with intense focus.
So their fingers never moved a millimeter.
Not a millimeter. Yet when researchers scanned the brains of Group 2 after 5 days, the results were astonishing. The mental rehearsal group had grown nearly the exact same neurological hardware as the group who physically played the piano.
Their brains looked as though they had been playing the piano for 5 days.
Exactly.
Their thoughts literally became their physical experience.
That is the immense power of the frontal lobe. It can reorganize the brain's structure ahead of the physical environment.
This means we don't have to wait for the wealth to feel wealthy. We don't have to wait for the healing to feel healthy. We can wire the brain for the new reality before it manifests. There is an anecdote in the book about a man named Bill that beautifully synthesizes this process of overcoming the big three.
Bill's story is a profound clinical example. Bill was suffering from a severe degenerative skin disease. It was painful and visually jarring. Through his own introspection, Bill realized that the disease manifested shortly after a period of intense chronic resentment and bitterness toward a professional betrayal.
He had become acquainted to the chemistry of resentment.
Exactly. And his everyday environment, his office, his colleagues, his routine, was constantly acting as a trigger, firing the neural networks of bitterness and signaling the disease genes. So Bill decided he had to overcome his environment. He left his life behind and went to Baja, Mexico for 2 weeks, completely removing himself from every familiar environmental trigger.
I always wonder about the practicality of that. We can't all just flee to Mexico when we get stressed. But I guess the principle is breaking the visual and auditory cues that trigger the brain.
You can achieve a similar environmental break by just locking yourself in a quiet room, but Bill felt he needed a drastic change. During the first week in Baja, he didn't even try to fix the disease. He simply worked on overcoming his body in time. When the old feelings of resentment arose, he observed them. He used his conscious mind to say, no, we are not producing those peptides today.
He actively inhibited the familiar chemical cascade. He suffered through the withdrawal.
He starved the old neural networks. By not firing them, they began to prune apart. Then, in the second week, having quieted the old self, he began intense mental rehearsal. He visualized returning to his family and his life, but he rehearsed responding to triggers with kindness, joy, and peace instead of bitterness. He generated the elevated emotions to match the thought.
He created a coherent electromagnetic signature.
He literally wired a new personality into his brain. And because a new personality creates a new personal reality and a new chemical environment for his cells, he halted the progression of his disease. By changing his internal state, he signaled new genes. He cured himself.
It is incredibly inspiring. But before anyone listening decides they are going to just meditate their problems away this afternoon, we have to talk about the psychological toll gate standing in the way. It is a terrifying space that Dispenza calls the gap, and I will admit, reading this part of the book felt like a personal attack.
The gap requires rigorous, often painful honesty. Dispenza defines the gap as the stark disconnect between two identities. On the outside, you have the facade, how we appear to the world. This identity is carefully curated. It is defined by our job titles, our possessions, our social media profiles, who we know, and how incredibly busy we are.
It is the avatar we present to society to ensure we are accepted.
But on the inside, there is the true self, who we really are when the door is closed and we are completely alone. This is the realm of our deepest insecurities, our suppressed anger, our feelings of unworthiness, our regrets, and our fears. The space between that polished external facade and the messy internal reality is the gap.
And human beings will do absolutely anything to avoid looking into that gap. We are terrified of the feelings hiding in the dark. So what do? We use the external environment to distract ourselves. I want to introduce an analogy here. It is like trying to hold a giant beach ball underwater. The beach ball represents all those suppressed emotions, unworthiness, grief, anger.
And the water is your subconscious.
Right. And holding that highly buoyant beach ball underwater requires constant active pressure. You cannot look away for a second. So to maintain the pressure, we consume constantly. We buy things we don't need. We stay frantically busy at work so we don't have to think. We binge television. We drink. We scroll on our phones for hours. We construct an entire lifestyle just to maintain the distraction.
But as your analogy points out, holding that beach ball underwater requires a massive expenditure of physical and psychological energy. Dispenza uses the analogy of standing in a small room and trying to physically push the opposite walls apart with your bare hands. It takes everything you have.
I am exhausted just thinking about it.
And that exhaustion is the biological root of the midlife crisis. By the time people reach their late 30s or 40s, the sheer energetic cost of maintaining the facade, of running from the gap, simply depletes them. They run out of ATP cellular energy, the walls start closing in.
And tragically, the standard response to a midlife crisis is just to try and buy a shinier distraction. The sports car, the affair, the spontaneous career change. But changing the external environment doesn't relieve the pressure of the beach ball. The gap is still there.
So how do you actually resolve it? How do you close the gap? Dispenza says you have to stop lying to yourself, you have to stop running, you drop your arms, let the walls close in, and you turn and face the emotions you've been hiding from. You admit who you actually are.
You let the beach ball pop up to the surface, it splashes you in the face, it is uncomfortable, but suddenly your hands are free.
That is the exact mechanism. When you stop expending all that massive energy to suppress your true self, that energy is suddenly liberated. It becomes free energy in your system. You achieve transparency. How you appear is who you actually are. And that massive influx of liberated energy is what you use to enter the quantum field and create a new destiny.
But I want to warn people, getting to that transparency has a major social cost. When you stop maintaining the facade, you inherently threaten the people around you.
You alter the ecosystem.
Because your old relationships were built on the old facade. You bonded with coworkers over shared complaining. You bonded with friends over shared anxiety. When you close the gap and stop engaging in those negative emotional addictions, your environment will push back. They will say, "What's wrong with you? You've changed. You aren't being yourself."
And you have to have the courage to realize they are right. You aren't yourself anymore. You are breaking the habit of being yourself. You are shedding an identity that was mutually dependent on shared trauma or negativity. It requires immense fortitude to withstand the pressure of your old environment trying to pull you back into the familiar.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. We understand the physics, we understand the neurobiology, we know the obstacles of the big three and the gap. But how do we actually do this? How do we rewrite the operating system? Dispenza outlines a 4-week meditative process. I want to emphasize, this isn't just sitting cross-legged and listening to a babbling brook.
No, meditation in this context is highly active. The word meditation comes from the Tibetan word meaning to become familiar with. The objective is to consciously move your brainwaves from the active analytical state down into the operating system of the subconscious so you can plant new programming.
Because if you sit down to meditate, and you get up 45 minutes later as the exact same personality with the exact same biology, you haven't meditated, you just sat quietly.
Exactly.
So, let's break down the mechanics of the 4-week program. Week 1 is purely about induction.
Induction is the process of shifting your brain state. Most of our waking hours are spent in beta brainwaves. Beta is the state of conscious, analytical thought, often driven by the stress hormones of survival. To access the subconscious, you have to slow the brainwaves down into alpha, which is relaxed and creative, and eventually theta, which is a hypnotic, deeply subconscious state.
To do this, Dispenza uses specific techniques, like the body part induction or the water rising induction. The core instruction is to focus your attention on the space your body occupies in space, and then the space around your body. I struggled with this at first. Why focus on empty space?
Because your analytical neocortex, the beta brain, is obsessed with analyzing physical matter, something. It is tracking objects, time, and your body. When you shift your focus to the volume of empty space, you are starving the neocortex of its normal input. You are moving from something to no thing. The analytical brain eventually gets bored and shuts down, allowing you to slide past the conscious mind and into the alpha and theta states.
There is a wild story about a man named Jose in the book that proves how powerful just this first step is. Jose had 10 massive, ugly warts on his hand. He was deeply ashamed of them. He started practicing the induction, just focusing on space, becoming no body, no thing, no time. He wasn't even trying to heal the warts. He just wanted to escape his own mind.
But by escaping his mind, by vacating his familiar personality and entering that expanded, coherent state, he stopped signaling the stress genes that were depressing his immune system. Once his conscious ego was out of the way, his body's innate intelligence rebooted. The warts simply vanished.
Week 2 builds on that coherent state with 4 steps: recognizing, admitting, declaring, and surrendering. Let's walk through those.
First, recognizing. While in that deep alpha or theta state, you conduct a life review. You compassionately observe your own life to identify the specific emotional addiction you want to unmemorize. Is it chronic anger? Is it the need for control? You observe it until you map all its triggers.
Next is admitting and declaring. This involves speaking this limitation out loud. Why is vocalizing it so important from a neurological standpoint?
When you hold a secret shame or an emotional addiction, it ties you energetically and neurologically to your past. Speaking it out loud engages Broca's area, the speech center of the brain, and physicalizes the thought. By declaring, "I am chronically resentful," you are severing the energetic bonds between you and the people or events that cause the resentment. You are owning the limitation which is required before you can dismantle it.
And then you surrender, which means you stop trying to figure out how you're going to change using your limited 5% conscious mind. You yield the problem to the quantum field, or universal intelligence, and ask it to organize the solution.
Moving into week 3, we actively begin pruning the old neural networks. The steps are observing and reminding and redirecting. Observing is becoming so acutely aware of your old self that you catch the habitual thoughts before they even trigger the chemical cascade in the hypothalamus.
And redirecting is where you play what Dispenza calls the change game.
This is a highly effective cognitive behavioral tool. During your meditation, you visualize the scenarios that normally trigger your unwanted emotion. You imagine getting cut off in traffic, or your boss sending a passive-aggressive email. You watch the old anger start to rise up, and right at that precise moment, you forcefully say the word change out loud.
You literally interrupt the pattern. Dispenza suggests shouting change when you catch yourself looping in negative thoughts while you're in the shower or driving your car. I tried this, and it feels a bit silly at first, but it works like a circuit breaker.
Because it is a circuit breaker, it leverages the opposite of Hebbian learning. Nerve cells that no longer fire together, no longer wire together. By violently interrupting the routine, you prevent the synaptic connection from firing. Do that enough times, and the neural network physically breaks apart. You're dismantling the hardware of the old personality.
Which clears the land to build the new house. That brings us to the final week, week 4, creating and rehearsing.
Now that the old hardware is pruned, you use the frontal lobe to lay down new synaptic connections. You ask yourself, what is the greatest ideal of myself? How would this new person think? How would they walk? What choices would they make?
This is the mental rehearsal part. You visualize the new reality, but crucially, you have to pair it with the elevated emotion. You have to feel the gratitude or the joy of that new life now, generating that coherent electromagnetic signature.
The story of Monique from the text perfectly encapsulates this final stage. Monique was a woman who had a deeply ingrained habit of being a victim. She felt life was always happening to her, and she was always lacking time and money. She decided to use this 4-week process to break that habit.
And her specific mental rehearsal was fascinating. She didn't just visualize a pile of money on a table. She visualized being a woman who made choices from a place of absolute abundance. She mentally rehearsed walking, talking, and feeling like a woman who had unlimited time and resources.
She achieved coherence. Her thought of abundance was perfectly matched by her feeling of joy and freedom. And because a new personality creates a new personal reality, her behavior shifted. The old victim Monique never took risks. But the new abundant Monique felt compelled to buy a lottery ticket.
Now, I have to be honest, when I read that she won the lottery, my skeptic alarm bells went completely off. It sounds too perfect, almost cliche.
Sure it does.
But when you look at it through the lens of behavioral alignment and quantum probability, she collapsed a wave of probability that matched her new electromagnetic signature.
The quantum field didn't respond to her wanting to win the lottery. It responded to who she was being. She became the energetic match for abundance.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, our outro. Because you cannot just leave this energy on the meditation cushion. You have to take it into your physical environment. You have to demonstrate it.
The hallmark of successfully changing your reality is achieving a state of gratitude before the physical event actually occurs. In the old Newtonian model, we operate on cause and effect. We wait for the outside world to give us a reason to feel good. We wait for the new relationship to feel love. We wait for the promotion to feel worthy.
In the quantum model, you must cause and effect. Gratitude is the ultimate emotional signature of receiving. If you are truly deeply grateful, your body's neurochemistry believes the event has already happened. You lock in the coherent signal.
And to maintain this, Dispenza recommends a practice of end-of-the-day questions. Before you go to sleep, you review your day. You ask yourself, how did I do today? When did I fall from grace and let the old subconscious programs run? How can I do better tomorrow?
It builds relentless accountability. It prevents you from slipping back into the 95% autopilot.
So who is this book actually for? I think this deep dive is for the learner who is exhausted by vague, purely philosophical self-help advice. Telling someone to just think positive is biologically cruel if their body is cellularly addicted to negativity. This book bridges the gap between mysticism and hard science. It provides a concrete neurobiology-based manual for physical and psychological transformation.
Gives you the how-to. It explains the error codes your brain throws and gives you the administrative access to override them. But before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on.
If Dr. Dispenza is right, and our individual coherent thoughts can literally restructure our DNA and alter our personal reality across time and space, what happens if a community, a city, or an entire culture achieves quantum coherence together? Are we just changing ourselves, or do we have the untapped neurological machinery to completely rewrite the physical world around us?
That is a staggering concept. Imagine millions of people holding the exact same elevated emotion and intention simultaneously. That isn't just personal growth. That is world-changing power. We highly recommend you pick up Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself to start your own quantum update. And make sure you subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss a deep dive into the books that can change your life.
Indeed. We are building a community of conscious creators here.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one. Remember, you aren't a smartphone. You don't have to wait for someone else to write the code for your next update. You have the power to step out of that room, stop pushing the walls apart, and rewrite your own operating system from the inside out. See you next time.